As president of the board here at the New Haven Preservation Trust, it is my very great pleasure to welcome everyone who's joining us online this evening. The Trust is a small organisation and it's taken the involvement of a lot of people to make this evening happen. So we are all the more delighted that so many people have chosen to join us today. This event is primarily about the Trust 2021 Awards, which are a highlight of every preservation year for us. But during the course of the evening, we'll also be holding the Trust's brief annual meeting and hearing about how the Trust survived and even thrived in 2020. Last year, we pivoted to do old things in new ways, and we also introduced some innovative ways of talking about and doing preservation. One of the things that we've done over the last year is learn how to put together a presentation as a Zoom webinar. We will deploy all those skills this evening, but please bear with us if anything briefly goes wrong, we will be back. So as I said, this evening is the work of many people at the Trust. At this point, however, I would like to thank specifically our sponsor for this event, the Community Foundation of Greater New Haven. We're very grateful to have that relationship with the Community Foundation. And I'd also like to acknowledge the State Historic Preservation Office at the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development for its ongoing support of the Trust. Before all was different in 2020, we regularly held our award celebration at City Hall, a building that in itself makes evident how innovative preservation can be. And I'm delighted that tonight we can continue that association with City Hall, although this time only in person, rather than also in place. We're going to launch this evening with some words from Aisha Woods, who is Executive Director of City Plan. Aisha, please.
Rona, thank you so much for the kind introduction. As Rona said, I'm Aisha Woods. I'm Director of City Plan. I am so honored to be here on behalf of Mayor Elliker. I want to start out with a really big thank you to everyone at the Trust. You have been a true partner to this with the city, in particular for my department for City Plan. And the appreciation is immense. We work closely with Elizabeth Holt for the Historic District Commission, but I feel like the support is really about shared vision and shared interests. So I'm really grateful to the New Haven Preservation Trust for the work you do, and also just for being the real people who you are, as we were appreciating just before this event started. It's actually, this year has been a really strange year, but it's actually a really exciting time for New Haven. Everyone can see the amount of development going on and the projects. Some have even likened, the level of activity and growth to this period that we're celebrating and looking at tonight, from starting in 1961. Really a time of really thinking about investment in cities again, and really recommitting to making cities a priority. Again, thanks to the Trust, you have helped us always to think about history and really use history to help us guide us in how we are thinking about current plans and thinking about reknitting the city together, growing the city in a different way than it was done in the early 60s. But again, some of the visions in the early 60s were about, they were really grand visions with good intentions. And I think being reminded of that history helps keep us humble and really think about a more inclusive approach to growth and investment in the city. So again, I really just want to personally thank the Trust, especially Elizabeth and also Susan Godshaw for always both being a partner and also, keeping us on track. So thank you again very much. And looking forward to the rest of the program.
Thank you so much, Aisha. We really, here at the Trust, greatly value our relationship with the city, and we're just so delighted to see the way this commitment to preservation is seen by all of us as a way of honouring the city of New Haven. I thank you so much for your kind words, but also for your invigorating words, for your stimulating words of encouragement. Thank you. I'm now going to move us on to the next major part of our evening, which is the awards. And at this point, I'm going to turn over to Duo Dickinson, who is chair of the Trust's Award Committee. Duo.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Rona. This is a unique year. This is a unique year in the history of the United States, but also in New Haven. But it's also a unique year for the New Haven Preservation Trust, because it actually is our 60th birthday party. This year's theme is 1961 to 2021, creation and preservation. Unlike other years where the NHPT Awards focused on the buildings and an occasional person which preserved and renewed New Haven, this year, the Trust celebrates the buildings, people, and culture of the year of NHPT's founding, 1961. It's been 60 years. The New Haven Preservation Trust goes beyond the preservation of buildings to fully honor the preservation of the culture that makes New Haven an extraordinary place. This year, we recognize some unique structures that follow the zeitgeist that will be described by Channing Harris. All saw their birth in the year of the Trust's birth, 1961. We also reflect on the prescient and deeply relevant vision of one of our founders and embrace a New Haven partner with the shared spirit of appreciation of our multicultural heritage. So I think now we go to the next part of our program.
Thank you, Duo. Can everyone hear me? This is Channing.
Hi, Channing.
And I'm delighted to see we have, I think, over 50 attendees at the program so far. Elizabeth, do you have a first slide for me to, here we go. Let's immerse ourselves in 1961, what turns out to be a really fascinating year. I won't tell you how young I was, but time does fly when you're having fun. 60 years ago, in 1961, Americans were listening on their AM radios to Chubby Checker, Connie Francis, and Ray Charles. Bonanza and the Twilight Zone were seen in black and white by those owning TVs, while the big movie that year was West Side Story, perhaps a tale still relevant today. The United States was booming from post-war expansion, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed up 18% for the year to, wait for it, at 731. A gallon of gas cost 27 cents, and a dozen eggs cost a little more than that at 30 cents. Russia erected the Berlin Wall, and President John F. Kennedy directed the creation of the Peace Corps, among many things that kept him busy in his early year. New Haven, Connecticut in 1961 was becoming a nationally known laboratory for urban renewal and modernist architecture. Interstate Highway 95 was 2 years old, and Route 34, the Oak Street connector, was being completed with sweeping demolition, dividing neighborhoods in the process, but paving the way for the new future of the city. Richard Lee was in the middle of his 16 years as mayor of New Haven from 1954 to 1970, aggressively advocating for redevelopment and quote, quote, progress with the support of huge amounts of federal money that enabled these changes. Ed Logue was practicing the new profession of urban planner in the belief that renewing infrastructure would enable new development and new behaviors, as Elizabeth Cohen described in our recent program, Saving America's Cities. Perhaps you saw that. The first of many significant modern buildings were new or in construction, such as Yale's Beinecke Rare Book Library, Ingalls Rink, the Yale Co-op and Morson Stiles Colleges. 1961 also produced major changes in the cityscape. The glass-walled First New Haven National Bank was one of the first to rise on Route 34, as was the Temple Street Garage with its curvilinear concrete forms. And this year's 3 honorees were also built in 1961. The world was being made new. Into this context, the trust was born. Witnessing the loss of an increasing number of valued older structures, such as the Sheffield Mansion here, a small group coalesced and undertook strategic actions to raise awareness of historic architecture and preserve it. As Peggy Flint tells in her account of the first 10 years of the trust, titled The 10 Years' War, the first decade, the potential loss of the James Dwight Dana House on Hill House Avenue in 1961 sparked this group to approach Yale and negotiate an agreement to preserve this unique gem by Henry Austin, now a National Historic Landmark. Coincidentally, there was an uneasy, expectant curiosity over the modern creations of the architects, engineers, and planners. While progress, quote, quote, was embraced, the realizations of this creativity received mixed reviews. And it's only now, somewhat ironically, through the lens of 60 years, that we see how special some of these structures were and are, such as Paul Rudolph's Yale School of Architecture, Art and Architecture, shown with its 2011 edition by Charles Gwathmey. In recent years, the Trust has honored a number of modern buildings as they've stood the test of time and stand out in the contextual fabric of New Haven. Some in contrast, others more sympathetically blending in, but modern architecture was being created for the first time here. As we celebrate our 60th anniversary, we recognize both the creation and preservation of some unique structures built in our founding year of 1961. We also reflect on the prescient and deeply relevant vision of one of our founders and embrace a New Haven partner with the shared spirit of appreciation of our multicultural heritage. Thank you for joining us tonight as we advance the mission of our founders as they initiated our role in the community, and we honor these good works. Thanks.
Thank you, Channing. Well, I think it's on to our first award. And the first award is the New Haven Preservation Trust Housing Award for housing which is of historic architectural significance as an outstanding representative of its period, exhibiting much of its original character by virtue of continued maintenance or sensitive rehabilitation. Well, this year's Housing Award goes to Newhall Gardens, as you can see on your screens. And in 1961, architects E. Carlton Granbery and his wife Diana took on the challenge to provide 36 on-grade apartments for seniors on 1.68 acres of on the block of Daisy Street, founded by Goodyear and Gem. The architect's vision was to create a new community with 10 buildings under 4 roofs, all set at a 45-degree angle to the surrounding streets, including a freestanding community room at the center of the site. An extraordinary site plan wove together 36 front doors, terraces, and supporting parking, using trees, walks, fencing to define layers of private and shared outdoor space. The buildings themselves responded to this innovative approach using the period's California style of low-pitched, hipped, and folding roof skates that use projecting eaves, which combine with the angled orientation to create an architectural archipelago that has been carefully updated and maintained over the last 60 years. Those plans demanded a revision after more than 40 years of use, and Newhall Gardens was renovated to provide energy efficiency, ADA compliance, while reducing the number of some units, combining them to create increasing the size of some of those units. Additionally, new windows, fencing, site lighting, terraces, heating and air conditioning systems, kitchens and baths were recreated while maintaining the modern edge of its original form. Newhall Gardens is an exceptional manifestation of the spirit of New Haven in 1961. It was built during a time of reinterpretation and rethinking. This example of new thinking has been an unqualified success, creating a community that enhances New Haven then and now. Accepting the award is Ed LaChance, Vice President of the Glendower Group, managers for Elm City Communities. Mr. LaChance.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending the event. The Housing Authority and the Glendower Group that I work for were an instrumentality of the Housing Authority that completes development projects. We are honored to have been recognized with the New Haven Preservation Trust Award for Newhall Gardens. Newhall Gardens is one of our oldest developments and has clearly stood the test of time. As you would just state, its development makes bold statements with its crisp geometry and angular roof lines. And I think it's also reflective of a period of time when public housing was treated artfully and with much care, as famous architects, much like the Rudolph Building at Crawford Manor, at a time when public housing was really treated with much more care. We had lost that for a while in the 70s and 80s and 90s, but I think the Housing Authority through the Glendower Group is now really striving to recapture that quality housing that people think of as places where they want to live. That's part of a neighborhood, and that's what our goal is. Once again, Newhall Gardens provides housing for 26 residents, each in one story, easily accessible. It's really a great testament to the design that it's so still so well loved by the residents. I mean, that's the true testament, I think, of Granbery's design. Is if you talk to any residents, that they love living there. And that community room that you mentioned, being right in the middle and just kind of how the buildings are laid out, it is always being used. It's also located within, almost a fully residential neighborhood. So it's a real quality development that allows the elderly population to age in place. So again, thank the organization. We hope to be back again as we're now in the early planning stages of tackling Crawford Manor, the Rudolph Design Building. So hopefully we'll be back again in a couple of years, and we'll make sure we consult you guys when we start to do the renovation planning for Crawford Manor. And thank you again.
Mr. LaChance, thank you so much for participating in tonight's awards program. And it really is a privilege to honor this wonderful community in the middle of New Haven.
Yes.
Our next award is this year's Merit Award. And the appellation for this award is for historic buildings that have been authentically restored or sensitively rehabilitated for adaptive use. And this year's Merit Award goes to the Conte West Hills Magnet School. The Conte West Hills School lies between I-91 and Worcester Square Park. It was designed in 1961 by the architects Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, otherwise known as SOM, an internationally renowned firm based in New York and Chicago. And the project was conceived as a group of temples in a field, as they called it. The original design consisted of 3 buildings wrapped in elegant precast concrete colonnades surrounding glass-walled pavilions. The 1961 ensemble consisted of a two-story main classroom building, which was a large square structure with a distinctive presence. The pavilion facing Worcester Place was once a public library connected to the other buildings by an open walkway. The wide 2-story opening in the center of the ensemble gives park visitors in Worcester Square a peek at the mid-block school building. Between the former library building and the school building is the auditorium, once a freestanding structure. The partner, the architectural partner Gordon Bunshaft, and associate partner Natalie Dubois were the designers. Bunshaft was the architect of record, and he worked closely with Dubois on this and many highly celebrated buildings. For decades, Natalie Dubois was one of the few women architects working on large-scale modernist buildings such as Lever House and the former Pepsi-Cola World Headquarters. It is now widely felt that Dubois was long denied her due as the designer of these significant structures. Natalie Dubois served as a role model for other women architects, with one summarizing her career saying this: "She was a great practitioner of lightness in architecture, with an elegant sense of proportion." The Trust is pleased to join those who have begun to give this great architect well-deserved recognition. The school itself was named for Dr. Henry Conte, a beloved neighborhood pediatrician who died in 1961 as the school was being built. As an early urban renewal project, the school served the whole community. It included an auditorium, senior center, public library, recreation room, gymnasium, pool, and a playground. Well, in 1999, Herbert S. Newman and Partners designed additions to the Conte School. One was inserted to connect the auditorium to the main school building with a new entrance. Its design is strikingly different from the original structures, but effectively knits them together. Also part of the Newman architect's expansion is a single-story addition, bringing the front door of the school right to Chapel Street. Behind a bold postmodernist entryway, this extension provides more classrooms and administrative offices. The architectural language of these additions reinforces the proper connection between a school and the community it serves. The Trust gives its 2021 Merit Award to honor the way in which the additions expand and adapt the school program while maintaining the fundamental strengths of the original Conte School campus. Accepting the award is Diane Spence, Principal. Welcome, Ms. Spence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dickinson. So first of all, let me, on behalf of the Conte School community, I want to offer our congratulations to the New Haven Preservation Trust on your 60th anniversary. I mean, we are really delighted that our school building has been given this Merit Award. We are always happy to be considered, to know that we're working and educating children in a building that is significant in the New Haven architecture, right? So, you know, this award kind of just says to us, it prods us to think about the building in which we work and how a physical structure can speak to the history of a community and speak to the changes, right? Sometimes we get so busy that we forget, right, just to look at things and to recognize how much thought was put into figuring out the design and also the materials, and to help our students and our community to remember those who came before us. So it often is that we think about the words of people to talk about the history of a community, but this evening, I am really pleased to say that a physical inanimate object can really speak so loudly and so passionately about changes and about intentions. And so I am delighted. And I want to say that we continue, right, with the intent of serving all the children of New Haven, because our school draws from every facet of the New Haven community, and not only the New Haven community, but also other suburban neighborhoods. So we are pleased to accept this award, and we hope and wish you all that is great, and that you would have continued prosperity and do the kind of work that is so important in our community. Thank you for this award.
Well, thank you, Principal Spence. Thank you so much. And we now go to a great award that we give almost every year. This is this year's New Haven Preservation Trust Landmark Award is for buildings or sites of outstanding and enduring architectural and historic significance. And this year's award goes to the Central Station Fire Headquarters. Before I go on, I would just like to pause and say that the New Haven Preservation Trust extends its sincere condolences to the family of Ricardo Torres Jr., a city firefighter who heroically died fighting a blaze on Valley Street on May 10th. Even during construction, the Central Station Fire Headquarters was a distinct marker along the Elm Street Grand Avenue corridor. And this 1961 fire station remains insistently expressive and sculptural. Designed by Earl P. Conlon with Peter Millard and Paul Pazzi, it's made of cast-in-place concrete of varying heights, using concrete detailing joined by window recesses to create a dramatic street presence. Its multiple towers rise and fall at its four corners. This visual excitement on the streetscape announces to New Haven that they have a fire department that is always ready for quick action. On the inside, the building has a series of highly ordered spaces, providing maximal efficiency of function as firefighters await their calls to duty at any given moment. The original highly polished brass poles are still used to bring the firefighters quickly down from their upper story sleeping living quarters to the ground floor, where they can jump onto their fire trucks. The building manifests an artful shape, careful craft, and a neighborhood presence that few places attain, a real gift to our civic environment. Well, Peter Millard, one of the building's architects, taking his Yale architecture studio on a tour in 1984, spoke excitedly about the satisfaction of seeing his perception of the interior and exterior of the concrete forms coming to life during construction, while looking up into the tallest tower, originally used for drying hoses. The built form manifested his enthusiasm, and everyone on the tour felt it, as we do today. The Central Fire Station, New Haven's fire headquarters, is a fine example of experienced form in architecture. It is a solid, sensational, and enduring delight. This year's NHPT Landmark Award goes to the Central Fire Headquarters Station. And unless he's out saving lives or keeping buildings from burning down, accepting the award is John Alston Jr., Fire Chief of the New Haven Fire Department. Mr. Alston.
Duo, I actually do not believe he has able to join us.
Saving lives again.
Of course. So perhaps we can move on, but we do thank him again for his work at the fire station.
An extraordinary building, an extraordinary fire department, and incredible human beings of all types that make up a front line of defense that has been unbelievably important during the COVID year. And it's wonderful that a building like this can recognize the importance of that civic group within the community of architecture that is New Haven. So the next award, which I'm going to give, is our final award before a break we're going to take. And it is exquisitely important for the Trust's 60th anniversary. This is the Margaret Flint Award, given some years, not all, and given judiciously to individuals or organizations whose support of preservation in the city of New Haven has contributed to the integrity of the community, the protection of its historic resources, and an appreciation of history. Our honored recipient is the late Carol L.V. Meeks. In the fall of 1961, Carol L.V. Meeks was unanimously elected as the first president of the Trust. Carol Meeks was a professor, an author, a scholar of architecture, and a president of the Society of Architectural Historians. During his 36-year tenure at Yale, Professor Meeks helped develop the School of Art and Architecture into a major academic institution. After his election as president, over the course of the Trust's first years, Professor Meeks skillfully turned a group of passionate volunteers into an authoritative advocate for the community's benefit. He orchestrated the formal incorporation process, going to a 501c3 status, and instituted a full membership campaign that lives on today. And if you aren't a member of the Trust, by the way, we'd love to have you. Professor Meeks organized the Trust development of criteria for honoring and preservation work and evaluate the buildings the Trust was actually formed to save. A standards committee was established to make recommendations to the board of directors. Based on these recommendations, the Trust awarded its first 6 landmark plaques in October of 1962. Meeks single-handedly applied for the Trust's first grant from the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, and then used the funds for a consultant to produce a map and a photographic record of 750 historic structures throughout the entire city of New Haven. A selection of these were researched further and then filed with the National Historic American Building Survey in the Library of Congress. The Trust's growing role in the community brought it into contact with contemporary problems of the day. The first Trust newsletter, in fact, states that Professor Meeks often found himself giving, quote, sudden but carefully documented, close quote, statements to the press. Yet cordial relations prevailed, evidenced by the warm letter of support from then Mayor Richard C. Lee, who noted that he fully was in sympathy with all your objectives, close quote. Sadly, Carol Meeks resigned as president of the Trust in 1963 due to ill health, although he remained on the board of directors until his death in August of 1966 at the young age of 59. For his unparalleled work on behalf of the Trust in its first few years, we honor Carol L.V. Meeks with a 2021 Margaret Flint Award. Accepting the award is his daughter, Victoria Meeks Blair Smith. Ms. Blair Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Dickinson. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
All right. I just want to say that my father would be extremely proud that the trust not only exists, but it goes on doing the things that it was supposed to do. The other thing is that on behalf of myself and my sister, we are very happy to have a Peggy Flynn Award. Thank you.
Well, speaking for the trust, I just have to say that without leaders like that in this incredibly dynamic and changing time in the mid 20th century, New Haven wouldn't be this amazing creation of so many different humans, styles, histories, and just aesthetics. And so your father was a seminal, crucial part in the creation of what everybody almost takes for granted today, the miracle of this extraordinarily diverse place called New Haven. So I thank you for joining us very much, Ms. Blair Smith. Now I'm going to take an interlude, or we're going to take an interlude before our final award, and I'm going to turn the program back to our president, Rona Johnston.
Thank you very much, Joe, and congratulations to all the award winners, to the buildings, the communities, and the individuals who really model for us what preservation is all about. Thank you and congratulations. As Joe just said, at this point in the evening, we're going to take a brief step away from the awards, a detour, as it were, on the way to our final award for 2021, which will be presented after a brief annual business meeting, which will include a report with more images of the Trust's activities in 2020. So this part of the evening also allows some interaction with our audience. We're going to ask you to vote along the way using the chat function on your screen. You can do so when the time comes by entering in the chat, yes, no, or abstain. And do remember, please stay with us and until we reach that final award as well at the end of the evening. So now I'd like to open the Trust annual meeting and call us to order. The material for this meeting can be referred to via a link on the Trust website. And because the webinar does not easily allow for discussion, we'll abbreviate the process somewhat, but do please contact us subsequently if you have any questions or comments on the business that we're going to conduct tonight. We were very happy to hear from you and answer any questions you may have. So the first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of last year's 59th annual meeting. We're going to waive the reading of the minutes as they are readily available on the website to anybody who's attending tonight. So the motion is to approve the minutes of the 59th annual meeting. The motion has been moved and seconded by members already. So please enter yes, no, or abstain in the chat to approve the minutes of the 59th annual meeting. So the motion has passed and the minutes are approved. Thank you. The second item this evening on the agenda is the financial report for 2020. And for this, I'm going to call on the Treasurer at the Trust, Glenn Trunkfield, to take us through the annual report. Glenn.
Thank you, Rona. First, I'm assuming everyone can hear me. All right. First, I'd like to express my appreciation to Susan Godshaw for ably serving for so many years as the treasurer of the trust, and to express my thanks to her for her willingness to remain on a bit longer as our assistant treasurer, helping us to achieve a smooth transition as we go forward. One of the consequences of moving the date of the annual meeting this year to tonight is that our annual financial audit has only just begun. Therefore, we are presenting the financial review for 2020 as pending audit versus the reviews of 2018 and 2019, which were a summary of the audited numbers. Not included in the total income line for 2020, unlike 2018 and 2019, is the investment income on our unrestricted funds. When the audit is completed, total income for 2020 is expected to increase by the amount of the investment income received in 2020. Note that to date, the trust has never had to use investment income for operating purposes. So what you see before you is a true representation of our operations for the year. As you can see on the financial summary page, the trust had a net operating surplus of $8,828 for the year. COVID impacted many things during the course of 2020. But while some of income categories were less than in previous years, so too were our expenses, especially expenses related to program, as in-person events were not held after March of last year. The trust also benefited from a PPP loan from the government in the amount of $12,477. This loan has now been converted to a grant under the terms of the PPP program. Absent this, we would have shown a small deficit of approximately $3,600. At the end of 2020, reserves, restricted funds, and the endowment totaled $334,477, which was a healthy increase over recent prior years. That is the extent of my report, and I will now turn this back to Rona.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Indeed, we have a motion before us, which is to approve the financial report for the year 2020 pending audit. Again, the motion has already been moved and seconded. You can consult the figures on our website. They replicate what Glenn was just speaking to just now. But the motion is to approve the financial report for the year 2021 pending audit. Please enter yes, no, or abstain in the chat. So thank you all very much. We have definitely have our financial report approved. The financial report passes. Thank you very much. And thank you to Glenn, who is our treasurer, and to Susan Godshaw, who is our assistant treasurer, for all their work through a challenging year last year. The final item of business in this meeting, part of the meeting, is the appointment of new directors. And for this, I'm going to turn over to Bobby Paulette, who is chair of the governance committee here at the Trust. Bobby.
Thank you, Rona. So, on behalf of the nominating committee, which is part of the governance, we're presenting a slate of directors for the members' approval. The proposed new directors are Khalil Kuta and Ming Thompson. Their biographies were part of the program information presented on the website, so I hope you took an opportunity to look at those bios. Just a reminder, we're voting on the slate, not the individuals. And as with our early votes, we will be indicating in chat. So a yes, no, or abstain. So I'm asking folks to vote now. Okay, thank you. The slate has been approved. We also have one director who's eligible for another term. Bill Christmas is finishing his first 3-year term, and we are proposing him for a second 3-year term. So with the others, we're asking you to vote on approving Bill for another term. It's yes, no, or abstain via chat. Okay, thank you. Bill has been approved. And so I welcome Khalil and Ming. And Bill, welcome back. I'm going to turn this back over to Rona. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bobby. We are really delighted that Khalil and Ming are joining us on the board and that Bill is returning for a second term. But at the same time, with new members comes with disappointments, the sadness of having to say farewell to long-standing members of the board. And I'd like to thank our 2 outgoing board members on behalf of the Trust and on behalf of all their friends here at the Trust. Both these 2 individuals have termed out, having given endlessly of their professional expertise to the Trust for many years. Bob Griswatz, an architect, is a familiar presence in preservation in New Haven, And for decades now, he has contributed to the Trust in manifold ways. I'd like to highlight his many years as chair of the Preservation Committee and his very hands-on role as a tour guide. Karen Krochmal, a graphic designer by profession, is the remarkable force behind so much of the Trust's striking design and outreach, as she's been chair of our Communications Committee. Her appreciation of good design embraces the buildings of New Haven, and she is in particular a committed and incredibly well-informed advocate for New Haven's modernist heritage. Bob and Karen, thank you both so much for all that you have done in your long service as directors for the Trust. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn over to Elizabeth Holt, who is Director of Preservation Services here at the Trust. I would say absolutely the linchpin of almost all our activities. And Elizabeth is going to talk to us about Trust activities in the remarkable year of 2020. Elizabeth.
Thank you, Rona, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're enjoying our retrospective of 1961 for our awards this year. But before we get back to our last award of the evening, we have one last thing to take care of, which is a brief look back at 2020 and the Trust's work in this challenging year. Like most of you, no doubt, everyone at New Haven Preservation Trust had high hopes and exciting plans for 2020. And we kicked off the year with 2 events highlighting modern architecture in New Haven. On February 29th, we offered a members-only tour of Ingalls Rink, designed by Eero Saarinen and Associates, and completed in 1958. Eva-Lisa Pelkinen, a renowned Saarinen scholar, and Wesley Kavanaugh, architect and principal at Roche Dinkaloo at the time of the building's renovation, led the tour. Then on March 4th, we presented Why Modern Architecture Doesn't Matter at BAR. Along with my colleague, Mike Stallmeyer, project manager at Preserve, we discussed the challenges and unique opportunities in preserving and restoring modern architecture. Not long after that event, normal life came to a standstill, and I packed up materials from the Trust office to work from home for the foreseeable future. And while we would miss being together in person in the coming months, this new online adaptation to life pushed us to find different ways of engaging with the community. For example, we now have a wealth of new resources available on our website. One of the first things I began working on from home was the scanning of over 5,000 photos from the Historic Resources Inventory. These photos were taken between 1979 and 1983 to accompany the citywide survey of architecture from Academy Street to Young Street. And you can now browse these photos of streets beginning A through F as of this afternoon, and look forward to seeing the full collection live by the end of the summer. We also made available for the first time online the Trust's own preservation guides, created in 1985. These guides include information on 4 major building typologies in Connecticut, as well as restoration advice for their historic features. For Jane's Walks, traditionally held on the first weekend of May in celebration of urban activist Jane Jacobs, I created 2 self-guided tours of Autumn Street and Beaver Hills. And later in the year, for Docomo Tour Day, I put together a self-guided tour to celebrate modern architecture throughout the city that would turn 50 in the coming decade. And though we still weren't able to offer an in-person tour, what at times felt like a restriction became an opportunity. The 2020 Docomo Tour is a driving tour covering the city from Westville to Long Wharf to Prospect Hill, an area that would have been far too large to walk. And as we all grew more comfortable with living a more virtual life, we held 3 online events towards the end of the year. On October 4th, Bruce Cluette presented New Haven Stations Past and Present. And on November 15th, all the way from Minneapolis, Tom Fisher presented Cass Gilbert and the Plan for New Haven. And held between these talks was our celebration of preservation on October 29th, which included our annual meeting and presentation of preservation awards. The evening was capped by my talk, The Changing Face of Preservation, which highlighted the need to address contemporary concerns such as climate change and racial injustice alongside the preservation of historic architecture. But life online didn't slow down the Trust's preservation advocacy work. Last year, we were involved with the preservation and restoration of 3 of New Haven's oldest houses. The Elizabethan Club received one of our Historic Structures Fund grants to repair its Palladian window, which was damaged by a rogue squirrel trapped in the attic. And we also continued work to ensure that the Pinto House remains listed on the National Register of Historic Places after its move. The house, located at 275 Orange Street, will be moved a few dozen feet north to accommodate the construction of a new apartment building. The Trust began conversations with the project's architect and developer in 2019, and we're thrilled to say that the move was approved by the National Park Service in 2020. And finally, we assisted in the Historic District Commission approval for restoration of the Robinson House at 601 Chapel Street, located in the Worcester Square Historic District. The house sat for several years with its delicate historic materials exposed to the elements. So it's wonderful to see this project underway. And while the work isn't quite complete, we're continuing to work with the owner and contractor in making some of the final design decisions. Throughout 2020, we also continued work with at-risk properties across the city. The Pierce Inn Welsh House at 131 Sherman Avenue was slated for demolition to make way for new construction at Yale New Haven Hospital's St. Raphael campus. Our hopes remain in finding not only a location to which the house can be moved, but a feasible use at its new location. Also slated for demolition are the former convent and rectory buildings at St. Martin de Porres Academy. While the buildings are in advanced states of neglect, we stand by our belief that they still hold significant historic value that is worth protecting. We continue to work closely with SHPO and other stakeholders to find a solution that honors the building's history while fulfilling the school's mission. Currently, the future of the Bigelow Boiler Building remains undecided, but the Trust was central to the discussion of its preservation throughout 2020. The building is a contributing structure to the River Street Historic District, one of the city's smallest, and its preservation is vital to the district's standing on the National Register of Historic Places. Its loss could mean the delisting of one of our city's 19 national historic districts. Another building from New Haven's significant industrial past faces an uncertain future. With much of the former Winchester Repeating Arms factory converted to apartments and office space, the remaining unrestored portion poses unique environmental challenges. The level of contamination is high enough that cleanup and adaptive reuse is not a given. But whatever the outcome, the Winchester factory will be an example of one of the many obstacles faced in the preservation of historic architecture. And in August of 2020, we marked with sadness the passing of Deb Townsend, a founding member of the Trust and tireless voice for the historic architecture of New Haven. Her treasured family home, Raynham, went on the market, and preservation advocates across the city have rallied for the respectful and appropriate continued use of the property, which is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Though not the only preservation issues faced in 2020, these 5 cases illustrate the breadth of challenges undertaken not only by the Trust in the city of New Haven, but by communities across the country. And it's on that note that I want to thank you all for your continued support of New Haven Preservation Trust, as we could not do this important work without you. And I will pass it back over to Rona.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for that very full report. And this is also an opportunity to thank you on behalf of the Trust, personally to thank you for all you did in the year of COVID in 2020, for your dedication, for your flexibility, and indeed for your creativity in getting the Trust through 2020 so positively with so many innovative ways as well. Thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
And now, with the business concluded, we can turn to our final highlight of the evening, which is our last award. But there is one last task for everybody attending this evening. We need to end the annual meeting with one last vote to adjourn the business meeting. So please enter in the chat, yes, no, or abstain for the vote to adjourn the business meeting. Well, with very great haste, that vote has now passed. Thank you all very much. And now I'm going to turn over to Duo Dickinson as chair of our awards committee for the presentation of our last award this evening. Duo.
Thank you, Rona. And I should let you know that I am a member of the preservation committee, and all these projects you see on the screen right now involve hundreds, if not thousands, of emails, meetings, talks about the status and nature and creation of these, preservation of these buildings. And one of the people that we haven't mentioned much in the evening, which should be mentioned, is Susan Godshaw, who has been at the center of all of this, including center of these awards, working tirelessly on them. But her work is a beacon of energy and devotion, which I think is emblematic not only of Susan, but of the Trust, but actually emblematic, I think, of our last award. And our last award in the year 2021 is a thing that we've never done before. We have never recognized more than buildings a lot and humans some, and even some organizations, but we've never really broadened our scope to look at something which is even greater than the Trust's Preservation Trust view of physical communities, into cultural legacies. So what we're going to do in 2021 is create a new award. And that award basically will spotlight the mission of the Trust, a mission of preservation that is broadened to embrace the history of our combined legacies. This year, the New Haven Preservation Trust creates the 60th Anniversary Award for an organization which exemplifies the value of New Haven's cultural legacies. This inaugural award goes to the Ethnic Heritage Center. The Ethnic Heritage Center was formed in 1988 to combine 5 existing ethnic historical societies: African American, Italian American, Jewish, Ukrainian American, and Irish American. These organizations came together to provide an incredible array of programs and resources, including the archives of these and other groups. Since 1992, the Ethnic Heritage Center has had a unique relationship with Southern Connecticut State University, which provides their physical home and venues for exhibitions, programming, and archival space. These exhibits have focused on New Haven's various cultural legacies and have been shown in many local venues over the last 20 years. Additionally, the center has created tours that have included Worcester Square, the Lower Dixwell neighborhood, and the core and northern neighborhoods of downtown New Haven. The books that accompany these self-guided tours make these places in history come alive now. These tours have celebrated the people and places of New Haven, revealing history and reviving memories. You know, history is a subject, but it is embodied in the records, people, and products of our culture. Those physical artifacts can vanish. They can go away unless care is taken to preserve the fragile, tangible relics of our past. In that way, preservation is not limited to architecture. By recognizing over 30 years of dedication to our common humanity as manifest in our diversity, the Ethnic Heritage Center has carried out the mission of the New Haven Preservation Trust in its broadest sense. A tapestry can be beautiful, but a quilt adds the richness of context and history. For over 30 years, the Ethnic Heritage Center has sewn together New Haven's cultures in a quilt of understanding that is a gift to our city. Accepting the award is Gloria Horbati, President of the Ethnic Heritage Center. Is Ms. Horbati there? I hope Ms. Horbati is there. She had warned us. Oh, you're there?
I'm here.
Oh, yay, Ms. Horbati, good to see you.
I couldn't unmute. I'm sorry. I'm challenged with all this stuff, so.
It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for accepting the award.
Well, we thank you very much for considering us for this award. I'd like to thank the New Haven Preservation Trust for this honor and for the important work that you do to preserve historic buildings in our community. In the last couple of years, we have worked together to write letters of support for preserving the former Pinto House on Orange Street, which is part of one of our Walk New Haven cultural heritage tours, and the Gulf Street Armory. In many ways, our stories are similar. Just as you protect historically and architecturally important buildings, our mission is to protect and share the documents, pictures, and records that tell the stories of our communities. The model for the Ethnic Heritage Center was the Institute of Texan Cultures in San Antonio, Texas. We currently have 5 historical ethnic societies, beginning with the Jewish Historical Society of Greater New Haven, founded in 1976, the Italian American Historical Society, founded in 1979, the Connecticut Ukrainian American Historical Society, founded in 1983, the Connecticut Irish American Historical Society, founded in 1988, and the Greater New Haven African American Historical Society, founded in 2003. One of our goals is to help and encourage additional ethnic groups to form historical societies to preserve their histories in our community. The Ethnic Heritage Center was founded in 1988 and has been located on the campus of Southern Connecticut State University since 1992. We have created numerous cultural exhibits and programs. On display currently in our temporary quarters at 270 Fitch Street is an exhibit which traces the ethnic history of New Haven using U.S. Census data and our archives as sources. You may have also heard of our Walk New Haven tours, which are available as brochures, books, and online at walknewhaven.org. While these tours are intended to be self-guided tours, we have also trained New Haven High School students to help us lead our tours. Current tours include Lower Dixwell, Wooster Square, Downtown, and Downtown North. Students from Southern Connecticut State University have helped do the research for our upcoming 5th tour, Inner Grand Avenue between State and East Streets, 1860 to 1975. The EHC has had many wonderful community partners in the past and looks forward to working more closely with the New Haven Preservation Trust in the future. We wish you a happy anniversary. Happy 60th.
Gloria Horbati, it's a pleasure to give you this award. It's a fantastic recognition of our shared values and of also all the values in the extraordinarily diverse and varied little city that is New Haven. And with that, we conclude the awards section of this meeting of the New Haven Preservation Trust. And I return the microphone, as it were, to Rona Johnson, Chair of the New Haven Preservation Trust. Rona.
Thank you again, Joe, very much. all the awards this evening, and indeed the report and the Trust activities too, have for me an important message. Preservation is about buildings and places, but those buildings and places are also all about people, those who built and designed them, the many individuals who've inhabited them, the communities that gaze upon them are built up within them and around them. Preserving such architecture is about a legacy for future generations. And preservation itself is full of people's plans and projects, their ideas and inspirations, their commitment and their concerns. Combine people and preservation and you get an evening like tonight. Thank you all so much for caring about New Haven, for caring about its buildings and its communities, and for caring about preservation. Thank you for joining us tonight, and good night.